Have you ever wondered what would happen if a beggar boy held a secret that could change a millionaire's destiny? This is the story of Henry, a man who had everything. Money power, yet was powerless against the suffering of his young daughter who was paralyzed. In despair, he tried everything seeking out the world's top specialists, but all was in vain. Until one day, a beggar boy walked up to him and said, "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again." These seemingly crazy words ignited an unexpected journey where belief and courage would confront doubt and prejudice. The Atlanta sky, usually a vibrant canvas of southern warmth, felt like a sheet of industrial gray that morning. It pressed down on David Albright as he maneuvered his gleaming black Lexus through the labyrinth of downtown traffic. Every polished surface of his high-rise office, every meticulously managed asset in his vast financial empire, felt utterly meaningless compared to the dull ache in his chest. His 6-year-old daughter Lena sat in her booster seat behind him, her vibrant, tightly braided hair framing a face that had forgotten how to smile. She stared out the window, silent, a tiny, fragile statue of despair. The Midtown Pediatric Center loomed ahead, a fortress of advanced medicine that had become their second home. David, a man accustomed to commanding rooms and dictating terms, felt utterly powerless within its sterile walls. He'd poured fortunes into Lena's recovery since the swing set collapsed, crushing not just her lower spine, but the very light in her eyes. Managing expectations. The specialists had droned their voices, hushed their eyes, sympathetic, but ultimately devoid of hope. A long road ahead. Miracles take time. Words, just words that felt like gravel under his tongue. His wealth, that golden key that unlocked so many doors, was useless here. It couldn't buy back Lena's laughter, couldn't mend what was broken inside her. He pulled into a reserved parking space, the crisp morning air biting at his exposed skin as he got out. Lena remained still, her small hand already reaching for the familiar wheelchair folded neatly in the back. The routine was ingrained now, a painful ballet of dependence. As David gently lifted her, the weight of her small, limp legs felt heavier than any corporate burden he'd ever carried. He adjusted her carefully in the chair, a wave of exhaustion washing over him. This wasn't just a trip to the hospital. It was a daily pilgrimage to the altar of what-ifs and if-onlys. Their path to the automatic glass doors was a familiar one, worn smooth by countless desperate parents. But today something shifted. Just beyond the manicured shrubs that lined the hospital entrance, a small figure sat on a tattered, surprisingly clean mat. It was a boy no older than 9, his oversized faded hoodie obscuring most of his face, but not the intense, almost luminous quality of his eyes. One of his worn sneakers, a bright splash of yellow duct tape holding it together, peeked out from under his frayed jeans. He wasn't begging, wasn't making eye contact with passers-by. He was sketching in a weathered notebook, his brow furrowed in concentration. David, always keenly aware of his surroundings, found himself momentarily unsettled. He was used to controlling his environment, to moving through the world with an air of untouchable authority. This boy, silent and unassuming, defied easy categorization. He was simply there, a quiet anomaly in a world of bustling urgency. David clutched the handles of Lena's wheelchair a little tighter, a vague discomfort prickling at him. He quickened his pace, eager to get inside, away from the quiet scrutiny of the child. Just as they were about to pass, a voice clear and unwavering cut through the chill. It wasn't loud, but it resonated with a surprising depth, a quiet conviction that made David freeze mid-stride. "Sir!" the boy said, his eyes now fixed directly on Lena, then meeting David's. "I can make your daughter walk again." David's breath caught in his throat. His first instinct wasn't anger at the audacity or even confusion. It was a profound, almost dangerous sense of hope that flared up, shocking him with its intensity before his rational mind slammed it shut. A trick, a scam, a child's delusion. He scoffed a dry, humorless sound. "Listen, kid, that's incredibly disrespectful." David muttered, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. He pushed Lena's wheelchair forward a little too abruptly, leaving the boy sitting there still observing. He didn't look offended or even surprised. He just watched them go, his gaze following Lena, then David, with an unsettling knowingness. David didn't look back, but the words and the unwavering conviction in the boy's eyes had already lodged themselves deep in his mind, a stubborn itch he wouldn't be able to scratch. The heavy glass doors of the Midtown Pediatric Center hissed shut behind them, sealing David and Lena back into their world of sterile air and grim realities. But outside, the boy remained a quiet promise hanging in the cold Atlanta air, already beginning to chip away at the edges of David Albright's carefully constructed despair. The seed of an impossible hope had been planted. The days that followed blurred into a monotonous cycle of appointments and hushed consultations. David sat through endless updates from therapists and neurologists, each using the same measured phrases, the same gentle disclaimers. He'd heard it all before, the careful language of managed expectations, the long winding road ahead, the elusive promise of miracles that take time. Yet amidst the medical jargon and the sterile efficiency of the Midtown Pediatric Center, one image persisted, a small, stubborn presence in his mind, the boy with the taped-up shoe and his audacious claim, "I can make your daughter walk again." The words echoed a quiet, insistent drumbeat against the fortress of his despair. David tried to dismiss it, to rationalize it away. This had to be some strange coincidence, maybe even a scam. What could a 9-year-old boy sitting outside a hospital with duct tape on his shoes possibly know about helping someone like Lena? But something about the boy's voice, the sheer conviction in his eyes, stayed stuck in Jonathan's head, pulling at him. It felt dangerous, like hope, a feeling he hadn't truly allowed himself to entertain in months. He found himself drawn back to the hospital almost against his will. The air was still crisp, but the sun had broken through the clouds. There he was, Kaylin, still in the same spot, same mat, same weathered notebook. This time, Kaylin was looking directly at David as if he knew he'd come back. David hesitated, glancing down at Lena, whose head rested on his shoulder, eyes closed. Her body felt too light, far too light for a kid her age. He walked over the words tumbling out before he could filter them. "You again," he muttered. "Why would you say something like that? You think this is funny?" Kaylin shook his head slowly. "No, sir. You don't even know her." David snapped, gently lowering Lena into the back seat. "You don't know what she's been through. You don't know what we've been through." Kaylin didn't back down. "I don't have to know her to help." David straightened up, the absurdity of the situation pressing down on him. "You're what, 9, almost 10? Kaylin nodded. "Exactly. You're a little boy sitting outside a hospital with duct tape on your shoes. What could you possibly know about helping someone like my daughter?" Kaylin looked down, his fingers tracing the edge of his notebook. His voice was quiet, steady. "My mama used to help people walk again," he said. "She was a physical therapist. She taught me stuff. She said the body remembers things even when it forgets for a while." David stared at him, skepticism hardening in his chest. "So, what, you watched her do some stretches and now you think you're a doctor?" "I watched her help a man walk after being in a chair for 5 years," Kaylin said, his eyes lifting to meet David's. "She didn't have machines or nurses, just her hands, her patience and faith." David opened his mouth to speak, then stopped. He glanced around. A nurse passed by, giving Kaylin a small wave. A janitor from the hospital nodded in the boy's direction. They all seemed to know him. This wasn't some isolated incident. Kaylin was a fixture here. "I'm not giving you money," David stated, cutting straight to what he assumed was the boy's true motive. "I didn't ask for money," Kaylin replied, unfazed. "Then what do you want?" Kaylin took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Just 1 hour. Let me show you." David looked back at Lena, who had now opened her eyes and was watching both of them quietly. He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I should walk away right now," he muttered. Kaylin didn't move. "I should call security," David added, testing the boy. Still, Kaylin stayed silent. Finally, David huffed, a mix of exasperation and a sliver of desperate curiosity winning out. "Fine. You want to waste your time, kid? Meet us at Riverbend Park tomorrow. Noon. Don't be late." Kaylin nodded once. "I'll be there." David climbed into the Lexus, started the engine, and pulled off without looking back. But in the rearview mirror, Kaylin was still standing there, hands at his sides, face unreadable. Back at his sprawling home, David sat in his office, surrounded by untouched contracts. None of it made sense. He kept thinking about the way Kaylin stood there like he knew something. Lena poked her head into the room. "Daddy?" she asked. He turned. "Yeah, baby." "Who was that boy?" David paused. "Just somebody we met outside the hospital." "He looked like he believed it," Lena said. "Believed what?" Lena smiled just barely and walked her fingers across the armrest of her wheelchair like they were legs. But David wasn't smiling. For the first time in a long time, something inside him didn't feel numb. It felt dangerous, yes, but more than that. It felt like the fragile, terrifying flutter of hope. This wasn't just about Lena's legs anymore. It was about a father broken by circumstances being unexpectedly challenged by a child who seemed to hold the very key to what he'd lost. Riverbend Park was the kind of place most people passed by without a second glance. A cracked basketball court, a few swings with chains that squeaked like hungry ghosts, and a patch of grass that desperately tried to be a soccer field on Sundays. It was usually empty, especially around noon. But that day, Kaylin was already there. He sat on the bench closest to the biggest oak tree, not sketching, but with a small gym bag at his feet, and a folded towel on the bench beside him. He wore the same oversized hoodie, but today it felt less like a shield and more like a uniform. At 12:07, David's sleek Lexus pulled up. He didn't say anything at first, just got Lena out, set her gently in her wheelchair, and wheeled her over to where Kaylin sat. David didn't make eye contact, his arms crossed tight as if he was already regretting being there. Kaylin stood up when they arrived. "Hi again," he said politely. David gave a stiff nod. Lena waved shyly, a tiny flicker of curiosity in her eyes. Kaylin smiled at her. "Hi, Lena." Her eyes lit up a little. "Hi." David raised an eyebrow. "How do you know her name?" "You said it yesterday," Kaylin replied simply. "I remember stuff." David didn't respond. He just gestured at the towel. "So what now, magic carpet ride?" Kaylin ignored the jab. "No, sir. Just the basics." He opened his bag and pulled out a pair of socks, a tennis ball, a small jar of cocoa butter, and a plastic container filled with what looked like warm rice wrapped in cloth. David squinted. "What is all that stuff?" "My mom used," Kaylin answered. "The rice is for heat, helps loosen tight muscles. The ball is for pressure points." David folded his arms again. Kaylin turned to Lena. "If it's okay, can I work with your legs for a little while? Nothing hurts, I promise. And if anything feels weird, just say, 'Stop,' okay?" Lena looked up at her dad. He sighed. "You can try. Just be careful." Kaylin knelt down beside her chair. He gently unwrapped the blanket from her legs and placed the warm cloth rice pack over her thighs. Lena flinched slightly. "Too hot?" he asked. She shook her head. "It feels good." Kaylin nodded and waited. After a few minutes, he began to gently move her legs. Not yanking, not forcing, just small rotations, side to side, up and down. David watched closely, ready to jump in if something went wrong. But nothing did. "You ever do this before?" he asked, suspicious. Kaylin didn't look up. "My mama used to take me to shelters after school. She helped veterans folks who couldn't afford therapy. Said everybody deserves to feel human again. I used to carry her bag." David raised an eyebrow. "And she taught you this stuff?" "Yeah," Kaylin said. "Said the body don't always need fancy, just attention." He tapped lightly on Lena's knee with his knuckle. "You feel that?" "No," she whispered. Kaylin nodded again, unfazed. "That's okay. I'll keep asking." He kept talking to her while working, asking about her favorite colors, her favorite food, what shows she liked to watch. At first her answers were short, but then she started asking him questions. "Do you live around here?" "Kind of." "Do you go to school?" "I used to." "Why not anymore?" Kaylin hesitated. "My mom got sick. Then she passed." Been trying to figure things out since. Lena looked down. I'm sorry. Kaylin gave her a small smile. Thanks. David's posture softened slightly, but he didn't speak. After about 30 minutes, Kaylin gently tapped her ankle again. You feel that? Lena blinked. A little. Like pressure. Kaylin looked up at David. That's good. David squinted. She sometimes says that during her regular sessions. Yeah, Kaylin replied, but those sessions are inside a room full of machines. Sometimes kids get scared of machines. They tighten up. But here, he gestured to the open park. There's air trees. Feels different. David didn't say anything, but he was definitely listening now. Kaylin helped Lena stretch both legs, then gave her some simple movements to try with her toes just wiggling. Nothing obvious happened, but she didn't look discouraged. I'll show you again next week, Kaylin said, standing up. It takes time, but your muscles, he pointed to her thighs, they still remember how to be used. You just got to remind them. Lena smiled bigger this time. Okay. David cleared his throat. We're not promising anything, he said quickly, almost to himself. Kaylin nodded. I'm not either. I'm just trying. David stared at him for a long second, then without warning, he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded bill and held it out. Kaylin stepped back. No, sir. I don't want your money. David looked surprised. Then why are you doing this? Kaylin shrugged. Because your daughter smiled. David looked down at Lena. She was still smiling. But he didn't understand how a boy who had lost everything could give so much to a girl he barely knew. This wasn't just about physical movement. It was about the subtle, profound shift happening within David himself. A crack in the emotional wall he'd built, allowing a tiny, fragile tendril of pure, unadulterated hope to take root. The next chapter, he sensed, would be about more than just Lena's legs. It would be about his own awakening. The following Sunday was warmer, but Kaylin still wore his oversized hoodie. Not because he needed it for the chill, but because he'd once quietly explained to Lena his mom used to call it his helper's coat. She'd said every good healer needed something that reminded them why they cared. He was already at Riverbend Park by 11:45, his mat laid out, supplies lined up, and a bottle of water sitting beside him. A few kids played basketball on the cracked court nearby, their shouts echoing faintly. Someone's dog barked in the distance. At exactly noon, David's Lexus rolled up. Lena was grinning before the car even stopped. Kaylin waved at her. Hi, Lena. Hi. She chirped, her braids bouncing as David helped her into the wheelchair. David looked tired again, but different this time. Less weighed down. He gave Kaylin a small nod, no words, but it was more than last week. Kaylin got to work. Same setup, same warm cloth pack. But this time, something had shifted. Lena was trying now. Can you press your heel into the ground? Kaylin asked gently. She closed her eyes, concentrating. Nothing happened. It's okay, he said. Sometimes it takes your brain a while to find the right path. It's like trying to walk through a crowd. You just got to push through. David stood behind them, arms crossed again. But this time, more to keep warm than to wall himself off. Why do you do all this? David asked suddenly. Kaylin glanced up. Because I remember what it felt like when my mom used to help people. She made them feel like they mattered. I want to do that too. David nodded slowly. You ever think about doing something else? Sometimes, Kaylin said, but this feels right. David looked at Lena. She was tapping her toes barely, but they moved. For the first time, he didn't speak. He just watched. The next few weekends, they kept coming same time, same place. Kaylin taught Lena how to use resistance bands to strengthen her ankles. He rolled tennis balls under her feet to help her brain remember where they were. He showed David how to massage pressure points behind her knees and explained how each nerve had a job to do even when it went quiet. David joined in fully, now sitting cross-legged on the grass, doing each motion Kaylin explained. He even messed it up once. You're bending the wrong way, Kaylin said with a grin. David gave him a side eye. I haven't stretched since college. They laughed, even Lena. About 20 minutes into one session, Kaylin leaned forward. All right, Lena, Let's try something different. He unfolded a belt from his bag and placed it under her knees, showing David how to hold each end. She's going to try to lift both knees now just a little. We help balance her, she controls the movement. David blinked. You sure? Kaylin nodded. She's ready. They gave her a few seconds. Her brow tightened, eyes narrowed. She grunted softly, and then her knees lifted slightly, barely an inch, but they lifted. David looked at her stunned. You did that. She smiled. I did it. He swallowed hard. You really did it. Kaylin nodded slowly, eyes on the belt. See, the body remembers. You just have to be patient enough to let it talk. David looked at him. You're something else, kid. But then came the bad day. It was the fourth Sunday. Kaylin showed up like always, but when David's Lexus pulled up, Lena wasn't smiling. Her eyes were red. David looked angry. She doesn't want to do it today, he said sharply as he lifted her into the chair. Lena refused to look at either of them. Kaylin approached slowly. What happened? Lena crossed her arms. I tried to move my legs this morning and nothing happened. Nothing I'm tired of trying. It's pointless. David looked away, jaw tight. She's been frustrated all weekend. Kaylin nodded. He knelt beside her again. You think I never get tired? Lena didn't answer. You think I didn't sit in a shelter and cry when my mom couldn't afford medicine, and I had to just sit there and watch? Lena's eyes shifted toward him. You're allowed to be mad. I'm mad sometimes too. But if you stop now, the part of you that wants to walk might stop trying too. She stared at the ground. I don't want you to give up, he said softly, because I haven't. Silence. Then Lena whispered, I'm scared. David turned. That was the first time she'd said that out loud. Kaylin leaned in closer. I am too. But scared don't mean stop. It just means you're close to something big. Lena wiped her face. Okay, she said. Let's try again. And they did. Kaylin guided her through the motions gently, with less talking this time, just presence, patience. David stepped in more too, helping her shift weight, encouraging every small twitch. After 30 minutes, Lena moved her right foot. Not a toe, her whole foot. It slid forward slow and stiff, but it moved. David knelt down beside her, blinking like he wasn't sure he'd seen it right. Do it again, he said. She did. Kaylin smiled, but didn't say anything. He just sat back and watched. Later that night, David stood outside his house on Peachtree Road, staring at the moon. He'd stopped asking himself who Kaylin really was. The question didn't matter anymore. Inside, Lena was giggling, retelling the footslide moment to her aunt on speakerphone. For the first time in 6 months, their house didn't feel like a hospital room. It felt like home again. But something inside David had started to shift, not just his daughter's legs, but the weight in his own chest. The guilt, the pride, the wall he'd built between himself and the world. It was cracking. Monday afternoon, David sat in his office, staring at an untouched contract. His phone buzzed every few minutes, emails, calls, client updates. But none of it felt urgent anymore. What kept looping in his mind was that moment in the park, Lena's foot sliding forward like it belonged to her again. He'd seen it with his own eyes, and the person who made it happen was a 9-year-old with taped-up shoes and no last name he'd ever heard before. He opened a new browser tab and typed, Kaylin Carter, Atlanta. Nothing came up except a few scattered results. He clicked through old local newsletters and community clinic databases. A few mentions of a Kaylin and his mother, Monique Carter, at a community clinic, but no address, no recent info. He shut the laptop and leaned back. This kid was a ghost. Except he wasn't. By Saturday, they were back at Riverbend Park, but things felt different now. David brought an extra mat and a fold-out chair. He handed Kaylin a sandwich when they arrived, didn't say anything about it, just placed it beside his gym bag. Kaylin gave a small thanks and tucked it away for later. Ready, Lena? He asked. She gave a big thumbs up. Let's do it. They got into the routine heat packs, stretches, toe flexes. Today, David joined in fully. He sat cross-legged on the grass, doing each motion Kaylin explained. He even messed it up once. You're bending the wrong way, Kaylin said with a grin. David gave him a side eye. I haven't stretched since college. They laughed, even Lena. About 20 minutes in, Kaylin leaned forward. All right, Lena, let's try something different. He unfolded a belt from his bag and placed it under her knees, showing David how to hold each end. She's going to try to lift both knees now, just a little. We help balance her, she controls the movement. David blinked. You sure? Kaylin nodded. She's ready. They gave her a few seconds. Her brow tightened, eyes narrowed. She grunted softly, and then her knees lifted slightly, barely an inch, but they lifted. David looked at her stunned. You did that. She smiled. I did it. He swallowed hard. You really did it. Kaylin nodded slowly, eyes on the belt. See, the body remembers. You just have to be patient enough to let it talk. David looked at him. You're something else, kid. Kaylin didn't respond, just started gently guiding Lena through the next stretch. After the session, as they packed up, David crouched beside Kaylin. Where do you go after this? Kaylin shrugged. Around. David lowered his voice. You got a place to sleep. Kaylin hesitated, then said, Sometimes. David exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. You ever think about coming to stay with us for a while? Kaylin's eyes widened. You serious? I got a guest room. You wouldn't be in the way. Kaylin looked down at his hands. You sure your neighbors wouldn't mind a kid like me? David gave a short laugh. Man, after what you've done for my daughter, they'd better not say a word. Kaylin didn't answer right away, but David could see the wheels turning. The next morning, Kaylin stood outside David's home backpack, slung over one shoulder, a rolled-up blanket tucked under his arm. David opened the door in sweatpants and a coffee mug in hand. Right on time, he said. Lena ran to the front hallway. Kaylin! He smiled. Hey, superstar! David stepped aside. Welcome home. The stage was set. The ripples of Kaylin's quiet magic were about to expand, touching lives far beyond the confines of a simple park. Life at the Albrights' sprawling home was a symphony of small, unfamiliar comforts for Kaylin. A soft bed, clean sheets that smelled of sunshine, and a small desk by a window overlooking a manicured garden. He woke up to the smell of coffee and Lena's impatient calls of Kaylin breakfast. Their once quiet house now hummed with the small noises that meant life. The quiet thud of footsteps, Lena's bubbling laughter, the scratch of Kaylin's pencil as he sketched, and the constant gentle sounds of healing. Lena's progress continued slow but steady. She was moving both feet now, not walking yet, but the wheels were turning, the connections sparking. David watched them, a profound sense of gratitude softening the sharp edges he'd worn for so long. One evening, as Kaylin helped Lena with her stretches in the living room, David sat beside him. You know, Kaylin, he began, you're a smart kid. You ever think about going back to school? Kaylin paused. Sometimes, but I want to help people walk again like my mama did. David nodded. We can make that happen, whatever it takes. It wasn't just a promise, it was a realization of David's own purpose. He wasn't just rebuilding a business. He was helping to build a future for this extraordinary boy who had gifted his family a future. The ripple effect began subtly. One afternoon, a nurse from the Midtown Pediatric Center, who often took a shortcut through Riverbend Park on her lunch break, spotted Lena. She watched transfixed as Lena, with Kaylin's patient guidance, pushed her feet along the ground, a determined look on her face. The nurse knew Lena's case intimately. What she was seeing was, by all medical standards, impossible. Word spread quickly through the hospital, then beyond, like wildfire in dry grass. The next Sunday, Kaylin arrived at Riverbend Park, David and Lena beside him, to find two other families waiting. A young mother, her eyes etched with worry, gently held her son, whose leg was braced. An older couple sat quietly, their granddaughter in a small adaptive stroller. They had all heard whispers, improbable tales of a boy, a park, and a miracle. Kaylin, with David's quiet, unwavering support, dedicated his time to these new children, demonstrating his methods, his voice calm and reassuring. You're not broken. he told one little girl whose eyes welled with tears of frustration. "You're just learning a different way to be strong." Lena, now able to shuffle a few steps with Kaylin's support, watched her hands folded in her lap, understanding the greater purpose that was unfolding. Within weeks, those two families grew to 5, then 11. Riverbend Park, once a forgotten patch of green, transformed into a vibrant hub of hope. A local pastor, hearing the stories, brought folding chairs. A diner across the street started dropping off bagels and coffee every Sunday morning. Flyers, hand-drawn and photocopied, began to appear on lampposts around the city. Free movement classes. Sundays at noon. Riverbend Park. The local news, initially skeptical, sent a reporter. Kaylin, standing beside David, insisted the story be about them, gesturing to the growing group of children and parents, not him. The segment, titled "The Boy Who Saw Light," captivated Atlanta. Soon, recognition and opportunities followed. A renowned physical therapist from a prestigious clinic, Dr. Aris Thorne, offered to mentor Kaylin, recognizing the innate gift and knowledge the boy possessed. A local nonprofit dedicated to children's health offered to provide specialized equipment and funding for Kaylin's classes. Tutors reached out, eager to help Kaylin catch up on his schooling. Kaylin, once a ghost drifting through the city, was now not just seen, but celebrated. 9 Sundays after that first meeting, the park was a sea of faces. Dozens of families, some traveling for hours, sat or stood, their eyes fixed on Lena. Kaylin, his face a mask of focus, guided her. "Okay, Lena," he said softly. "One more time. Remember what your legs know." David stood behind her, his hands hovering, ready to catch her. She stood. The crowd fell utterly silent, a collective gasp echoing through the trees. David let go, his hands trembling. Lena took one shaky step, then another, then a third, and then she fell, not onto the grass, but into her father's arms, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. Lena looked up at Kaylin, her eyes shining. "You said I would," she whispered. That night, as the Atlanta skyline glittered outside David's study window, he looked at Kaylin, who was quietly reading a book on anatomy. "You know, Kaylin," David said, his voice thick with emotion, "you changed everything. For us. For so many others." Kaylin looked up, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. "I already am," he replied. And so the story continues, a testament to the quiet power of a child who saw light where others saw darkness. It reminds us that there are people in this world who might not have fancy degrees, shiny resumes, or a perfect past, but they carry something far more valuable: heart, grit, and an unwavering reason to keep showing up. Sometimes the most broken people are the ones holding the tools to help others heal. And sometimes a single act of impossible hope can send ripples of transformation through an entire community, proving that true miracles aren't about magic, but about the profound belief in the human spirit. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more, don't forget to subscribe. Share this video with your friends and family, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Check out our other stories for more captivating content. See you in the next one.